Welcome to CoHNA Dialogues. My name is Sudha Jagannathan. I'm a board member of CoHNA, which stands for Coalition of Hindus of North America. Along with me, I have my co-host Suresh Krishnamurthy. He's a founder and executive board member of CoHNA. And I'm very, very happy to invite and welcome our guest, Savio Rodriguez. He's joining us from India. I am not sure if people don't know Savio. I, of course, know Savio in the sense that I watch him on P Gurus. I watch for his tweets. And so Savio is the founder and editor-in-chief of Goa Chronicle, a global online news portal publishing from India. They focus on investigations into social, political, and economic issues globally. And let me say, this is surprising. They believe in the journalism of truth. Oh my goodness, we need to applaud that. Something very much lacking in global journalism today. Savio comes with over 25 years of experience in media and journalism. He's worked in India and the Middle East markets. He has an impeccable reputation for being a nationalist and takes up social issues in India and around the globe. In the interest of nation and humanity, he is very much respected for his crusades against corruption, fight against abuses in the Catholic Church, and exposing global terrorism. Savio has also been recently appointed as the director of the Global Foundation for Civilizational Harmony, founded in India in 2008 to promote conflict resolution or avoidance. The foundation believes that all faiths are valid and sacred for their respective adherents who are strongly motivated by their own faiths. Also, the foundation believes that a harmonious relationship between faiths is possible through free and frank dialogue amongst them. So, Savio's personal commitment in leading the foundation is to take the principles of Sanatana Dharma globally as a means to avoid conflict and therefore all violence and ensuring peace as a reality. Thank you for those great goals that you stand for, Savioji. So, I just want to also say CoHNA is a grassroots advocacy organization, and we stand to fight and represent the rights of Hindus in United States and Canada. So I think we kind of align in some of those areas. I'm going to ask the first question and then hand off to Suresh. So my first question to you is, so much of a narrative in the West is about oppression of minorities in India, right? And so we want to understand the facts, the reality of, let's say, the Christian community in India from you. I come from Kerala. I'm proud to be one of those from a lineage of welcoming all faiths and giving refuge to everybody, never forcing conversion or any caste or any kind of markers on people. So with that, Savio, the question I have is there oppression of Christians in India? Are you afraid of the majority? Please go ahead.
Sudha, thank you for CoHNA for inviting me. I'm truly humbled by the kind words that you just said. Let me state this in as simple a word as possible to answer your question. I am an Indian first, and then I am a Christian. And above and over all that, I'm a human being, a human. India is my mother, Bharat Mata. And I don't think that I have to be afraid of being with my mother or living in my motherland because I'm a Christian. Today, many people across the world and in India have been setting a narrative for the minorities that they are in danger. I would like to ask every one of them, especially people from the Christians and the Muslim minorities, the Parsis, the Jains, are you afraid of your mother? Are you afraid of living in your motherland? India is not about majority and minority. India is about Indians. To me, the Hindus are not a majority community. The Hindus are my sisters and brothers, just like the Christians, just like the Muslims, just like the Sikhs, just like the Parsis, just like the Jains, the Buddhists, the Jews. all those who accept India as their mother, irrespective of their caste or creed, is a son and daughter of Mother India, is a child of Bharat Mata. So am I being oppressed by my mother in my own motherland? I think that's a joke. That is seriously a very, very rude joke on the nationalists, the people of India, and most of all, the children of India. India, as a mother, is protective to all her children. Of course, in families, you will have brothers, sisters fighting with each other for silly reasons. For silly reasons. Sometimes it is religion, sometimes it is caste, sometimes it is political parties, and sometimes it's probably because of economic status. But does that change the love of a mother to a child, even if they're warring with each other for silly reasons? It does not. Neither does it change the identity of a child. And that is the reality of India. And that reality comes from the very ethos, the spiritual and the cultural ethos of India, which is Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is about finding the God within you and finding the God around you and accepting everyone, including nature, as a creation of God, and you, an integral part of that nature. Today, India is progressing. It is progressing because the Hindus, the Christians, the Muslims, the Parsis, the Sikhs, the Jains, the Buddhists are all contributing to nation building in their own way. And that's what children do in a home. That's what children do with a mother. Now, let's assume for a moment, like it could be in any family, that a mother might not be perfect. Okay, let me give you my own example. My mother has a limp on her leg because of polio. And I never noticed it till about 16 years of my life. And a friend brought it to my notice saying, hey, your mother limps. I said, no, she doesn't. And then when it stuck in my head and I looked at it, and I realized my mother did limp. But it didn't make a difference to me 16 years before. It doesn't make a difference even after that. Because she's still my mother, right? To the world, they might have looked like an imperfection. To me, she is my mother who I love. It's the same with the country. We are not a perfect nation. We aspire to achieve perfection, but perfection is a pursuit. It is something that you aspire to, it's something that you work towards. That doesn't mean you stop loving your motherland. That doesn't mean you stop loving Mother India. So this narrative that is being created in the West, created by certain sections of society that want to spread fear, needs to be called out for the stupidity that it is. Please don't tell me that I, as a Christian in India, should be afraid of my own mother, because I'm not going to accept that. I am an Indian Christian, and I love my Mother India.
So, thank you for those words. I mean, this is continuing at CoHNA, the CoHNA Dialogues. We're continuing these conversations across religious boundaries. We had Rahat Tanveer and on a couple of times. We have you now, but I want to kind of take you back to an interesting facet about you that our viewers may not, that the people who are on this call may not know. You did not come to this conclusion about India being your home from your natural birth. You started out not liking to visit India. You grew up abroad and you grew up not liking to visit India, and somehow that changed.
That's correct.
So walk us through that transition. What happened?
Okay, so because I come from Goa, I always believed that I had foreign blood in me, that I was a Portuguese, and I grew up in the Middle East. So a lot of the experiences that I had were related to people I connected with from different countries. And whenever I looked at India, which was depicted in Bollywood, or ever I heard about India in some news item that I would have read, it had to deal with poverty, it had to deal with corruption, it had to deal with dirt. So whenever I would come to India for a holiday, and we did that quite often, once in 2 years, I would hate to come to India. I would consider it to be a strain on my mental balance to come to India. And we would come to Bombay and sometimes come into Goa. Bombay was, to me, a terrible experience in terms of the pollution. You would walk on certain streets and there would be crap on the streets and the roads would be dirty. There would be muck. Goa was like a village to me. The first time I had to use one of the latrines, it was outside, and there was a pig that actually came to do its job, and that scared me. So I didn't want to be in that village setting. And it was something that I despised. I honestly despised India. And when I was 9 years of age, my mom's father told me, son, it's all right to think that you are a foreigner, and that's okay. You're young, you're extremely young, but there will come a time in your life where Mother India will call you and you'll leave everything and come back. So I told him quite amusingly that that's never going to happen. Never. You will move on to a new world, but there's no way I'm coming back to India. But sometime in 1999 and early 2000, a lot of my family members and friends were moving to Canada, to Australia from Dubai. And I had a choice to take one of those options. I just couldn't get myself to take that option. If you were to ask me why, I still can't tell you why. I just decided that I had to come to India. I had to come into Mumbai. I did come into Mumbai, and it took me some time to understand India, but then I started to fall in love with it. I started to realize one thing that I didn't see anywhere else in the world when I've traveled to many places. That thing that India has is something that you don't see world over, and that is humanity in the most simplistic ways of connection. It only comes when your cultural and your spiritual ethoses are extremely ingrained. It has to be something that is carried forward from a value system from generation to generation. So let's say where I was trapped during the floods, that happened in Mumbai, and I was at the Indian Express, and we had to wait till the flood kind of went down, the waters went receded, and I started to walk from Nariman Point all the way to my home in Andheri, and there were people helping each other. There were people on the road with tea, with biscuits, with all kinds of help that could be provided. The same thing happened during the train bomb blast that happened, and I happened to be again close to one of these incidents. And again, I saw people come out in a very humane way. I haven't seen that in the rest of the world. Whenever I've traveled to other parts of the world, and that made me think that the people of India, no matter how divisive people might want to make it, at the basest level, an Indian is more humane in his approach rather than materialistic in his approach. He doesn't like you, or he doesn't do anything, or she doesn't do anything to you, to good in order to gain something. They do it out of a sense of duty, or out of a sense of dharma, to be kind to you, whether it's a Christian, whether it's a Hindu, whether it's a Muslim, whether it's a Parsi. So that's an ingrained cultural ethos, irrespective of the religion and the caste. And that is where I started to love India. And that is why I've started to hold India in such high value, because it's that cultural ethos. You could belong to any religion, but the blood that runs through you is the blood of Mother India. And Bharat was and is a race of people that are far superior, not only because of their intelligence, but because they are grounded to the reality of humanity. That's the truth. And that's what I love about it.
That's an interesting response in the sense, you come in with certain negative expectations, and then you run into something that makes that negative expectation turn positive because you're surprised by the humanity of it, by the gentleness. And now, historically, of course, India has never considered other people minorities in the sense, people who the Syrian Christian missionaries who first came in very early in early Christian era. They came in, they were welcomed on the Malabar coast. The Jewish settlements were welcome, the Parsis were welcome, and historically we never get a sense that somehow they were treated as minorities or somehow they were not equal. They were pretty much given the same rights as anybody else within the kingdom, so that's one. I guess that's a thread that runs through the history of India. So let's carry through your history a little bit. So you've come to India now. You're probably you were a teenager when you came to India, somewhere that
No,
in
I
that
was
age.
22 years of age.
Oh, okay.
I was
So you're
22
already. So then you went into a little bit. You went into a lot of entrepreneurship. You went into, and then you landed in journalism. So how did, of all the
No,
things that were,
I was a
so how did your,
journalist first.
okay, so
Okay,
how
so
did that
I
work?
was a journalist. I was a journalist first in Bombay, and then when I came to Goa, I realized that there was a very high potential market in my own home state. That's when I decided to come back and set up the business, which is where Goa Chronicle started on 13 years ago. And it is after Goa Chronicle, well, actually, there's a very interesting story to why I landed in Goa, and I think I should tell people because the person responsible for it deserves all the praise for what he told me. So I met the late Mr. Parikar in 2002 when I was a journalist with the Indian Express, and I'd come down to Goa. And I was in the business division, and I came down to Goa to report on a hospitality tourism event that was going on, and Mr. Parikar was the chief minister at that time, and we had a fantastic interaction. And being Savio, always had a lot of questions and always critical, and sharing my views at how Goa can develop. And Mr. Parikar left me with one thought, and he said, Savio, it's very easy for you to sit in Bombay or to sit in Dubai, from where you spend most of your time, and come and tell us in Goa how to run Goa and how to make Goa better. But why don't you come in back to Goa and do something about it? And he said that in 2002. So I laughed it out and said, okay, I'll consider it at some point in my life. And we were to meet the following day for lunch and at the CM's residence. And when I got there, there was a message with the person at the gate, the security, that Mr. Parikar has left for a meeting and he won't be able to meet you. And I was very upset by that at that point of time. So, I felt a little disappointed because I thought I'd get to lunch with Mr. Parikar, but that didn't happen. And I went back to Bombay and I was doing what I was doing. And then sometime in 2007, 8, 9, I started frequenting Goa on work-related concerns, on reportage. And I didn't get a chance to meet him at that point of time. But when I decided to come into Goa, and I went to invite him for the launch of our company, he saw me. And after 8 years, he said, hi, Savio, how are you? In Konkani is what he said. And he said, sorry, I could not meet you that time for lunch. I looked at him and I smiled. I said, after 8 years, you remember? He says, I'm sorry. It's, of course I remember. And my apologies. And I said, no, sir, that you don't need to apologize. I'm sure you were. You had something important to do at that time. And that's when I started to, I was not a political journalist at that point in time. I was more into business. But then I started to follow politics. I started to talk to Mr. Parikar. I started to understand what is the political situation in Goa, in India. I started to read a lot of books. I started to understand different political ideologies that existed in India. Started to learn about the Congress, started to learn about BJP, the other political parties, the RSS, the political conflicts that happened. And all that, through that, I was inspired by Mr. Manor Parikar to play a very active role in nation building, not so much politics, because I think it is a responsibility of every citizen to contribute to nation building. And that is where I got into aggressive on Goa Chronicle. By 2018 onwards, Goa Chronicle went beyond Goa. We started to do stories across India and then globally when we did the COVID crisis reportage, which even got us banned in China. I'm probably banned I know I'm banned in Turkey because I can't travel when we expose the Turkish control on Islamic radicalism. Saudi Arabia, there was an issue which has been controlled at this point of time. And of course, I know if I ever stepped into Pakistan, I would probably be picked up, but that doesn't matter. And that's when I kind of got very assertive towards my dharma, which in this case is being a journalist and being a journalist for truth. So that's really what it is. And then after that, I decided to venture into other businesses, which was to be more of a investor into startup companies, to encourage people to build new ideas, come up with interesting ideas, and that's what we've been doing for the last three years actually.
So I want to kind of lead you in a slightly different path here. One of the major knocks on India, and you see this in these quote unquote rankings that come out from these international organizations from time to time, one of the big knocks is on press freedom in India. Now, when I was growing up in India, there were, we never really thought about press freedom that way because there were literally hundreds of newspapers, hundreds of magazines in multiple languages, and everybody was having an opinion and everybody was stating whatever they wanted to state, and so on and so forth. And yet, over the time today, there's a narrative that press freedoms in India are curtailed, and people who either oppose the government or say something against the government are at risk, and they don't say enough things that are quote unquote bad about the government. Now, if I juxtapose that with the fact that you have just said that you can't travel to Turkey, you can't travel to Pakistan, there are places where you're really, I see, for example, Arfa Khanum or any of the other people who live in India, travel in India. I don't necessarily see them arrested. So, from where you stand, from the ground, as a newspaper man and as a news reporter, as a journalist, how would you, if you had to give a candid assessment of the ground reality for press freedom in India, how would you describe it?
Okay, so there's a difference between being a media and being a journalist. Media is a business. So people are driven by TRPs, people are driven by profits. Being a journalist is a vocation. It's a pursuit to finding the truth. And that's the principle in which I teach my team as well. Now, the truth is what you can put out so that people get an informed decision to make, and also get that kind of information to make that informed decisions. I have, as a journalist, even taken on the BJP in Goa, even though I'm close to them. I've contested an election on a BJP ticket, but that hasn't stopped me from putting out the truth. Were some in the BJP upset about it? Of course they were, but naturally, it's only a natural reaction. But that one won't stop me, right? Let me give you an example, and this is very pertinent because this is the issue happening in India right now. There was a viral video of two women paraded naked in Manipur that went global. Now, let me tell you why that incident happened. The reason that incident happened, besides the hate, was there was fake news circulating in Manipur on May 3rd that a mighty woman was raped and her eyes were gouged out. And this accentuated the hate. And that is why two women in a village, an 18-year-old girl who had a heart condition and who could not run away from the mob, was stripped, paraded naked, and raped, gang raped. The same with a 43-year-old woman. The men with them were killed. I spoke to the prime witness who gave a statement to CBI this morning. That entire incident that brought shame to India was because of a fake news that was circulated. So, press freedom comes with a certain responsibility. And that responsibility is to tell the truth, no matter what. Sometimes, if you see in media, if the crime is committed by a Hindu, it gets flooded all over, not only in India, but internationally as well. If the crime is committed by any other person from the minority community, it is only the Hindus that propagate it on social media, but most of the media does not cover it as aggressively as they would if it was a Hindu. For example, if a religious leader committed a sexual crime against a minor or a vulnerable woman adult, if it was a Hindu sadhu or sage, it would have become international news. If it was a minority, it would have been buried somewhere in the newspaper. That is the reason why I extended full support to those nuns, especially that one nun who accused Bishop Franco Mulakal of being raped 13 times and sodomized. Of course, the lower court granted him bail, but the case is not over yet. I've also raised the issue of other sexual abuse cases within the Christian institution. Why would I do that? I didn't do that to question the faith of the Christians. I would stand up and defend the faith of the Christians. But when an institution covers up sexual crimes of minors and of vulnerable adults, then it's committing the bigger crime than the person who's committed the sexual violence. And I did face a lot of resistance, a lot of hate at that point of time, especially in 2018, when Archbishop Anil Kuto made a statement saying that the Christians are in danger in India, democracy is in danger. If you go even by that same stories that they are planting it even now, there's a case that has been filed in Supreme Court, which states that there were 500 cases between 2021 and 2022 of violence and atrocities against Christians. So let me give you some statistics of that, which was provided by the government in court, in the Supreme Court. There were 495 cases. 263 of those cases were not even reported to a competent authority that could take any legal action. 263 cases were not even reported. 232 cases, out of the 232 cases, 73 cases were resolved. Because those 73 cases involved land disputes, some cases of superstition, some cases as frivolous as neighbors fighting with each other because of COVID. And you had 155 other cases where FIRs and non-FIRs were registered by the competent authorities. Now, my argument even then in 2018 and even now is if there are 155 cases that have been registered, the population of the Christian in India are about 2 crores plus. Does that mean all the Christians in India are in danger? Can you look at the statistics in US, UK, Canada, and look at the hate crime against the Jews? They are in 1,000 to 2,000 numbers.
Mhm.
Does that mean that world over, media is calling US a country that hates the Jews? Why are you creating that narrative? Because of that narrative, because of that fear psychosis, there are many Christians, and I know from Goa, many Christians are surrendering their Indian passports and opting for Portuguese citizenship, assuming that they will be safer in Europe. And we know where Europe is going. Let's take the case of Manipur itself. In Manipur itself, everybody was calling it a religious conflict. Hindus attacking, majority Hindus attacking, these attacking the cookies. I went on the ground. I spent 60 hours there in both communities. Met some nice people and some not so nice people. And every single one of them told me, irrespective of the community, the ethnic community they came from, that this is not about religion. If we are killing the cookies, it's because they are cookies. If we are killing the Maitis, it's because they are Maitis, not because they were Christians and Hindus. But yet the world was being told and still being told it's a religious conflict. It's not. And the truth
Savio, I
is,
want to ask.
it's go ahead.
I just want to follow up on that. I'll tell you that I have a lot of Indian Christian friends from my school, and they keep sending me the video from USCIR of Commissioner David Curry. You know, he has put out some videos about Manipur conflict being Christian Hindu conflict. So my question is, you know, here these are women in Kerala, very proud Christians with 2,000-year heritage and never having had any problems with living in that part of the country. Why would they believe David Curry and not Savio Rodriguez?
No, they don't have to believe me. I'll give you an example. I met 2 women yesterday who were also giving their statements to the concerned authorities. One was Nancy, the other one was Kim. Nancy lost her husband and Kim lost her father. Okay, sorry, Kim lost her mother and Nancy lost her husband of that in that order. So what is the story? They were beaten up. The husband was beaten up to death. The mother was beaten up to death. And when they ran for safety to a home, the mob was the Meitei mob, the Hindu majority mob that people are talking about, right? The mob was the Hindu majority mob that beat that husband and the mother. So they ran to a home, that home that provided them shelter and safety for a few hours, and then later on put them in a car and let them go towards safety, was also a Meitei Hindu. 2 Meitei Hindu men were responsible for their safety.
Yeah, I guess the point you're making is, you know, while religion can be, religion is probably a easy source to blame in the event of conflict. And there's actually academic research that talks about this in the sense when there is conflict between 2 people, the first thing that pops up is, you know, how can we make this about some kind of a religious conflict or a caste-based conflict or a property dispute between neighbors takes on religious overtones, right? So it's almost like finding an easy answer for a complex question, which could be, hey, you know, we have economic inequality. How do we deal with that, and how do we make that better? But in the meantime, if that economic inequality leads to some kind of a crime, why do we not treat it as economic inequality? Instead, we find an easy solution in saying, oh, it was religiously motivated, or it was caste motivated, or it was based on whatever, right? Now,
Well,
you also
Suresh,
mentioned, yeah.
to answer your question in a nutshell, okay, conflict is, because I work in conflict, I'm a student of
Mhm.
peace and harmony and conflict. Uh, Conflict is necessary for certain people in power to control the outcome of that conflict. Now, the conflict in Manipur, and I've said it live on television, is about the land. It's about Maitis and Kukis wanting control of the land, because the land is a gold mine.
Mhm.
Because of a 70,000 crore narcotics business. And narcotics is not only the poppies. Let me correct the notion that has been created. Poppies constitute only 35% of it. The remaining, another 10 to maybe 15% is cannabis, but the rest is synthetic drugs. And the synthetic drugs, while the cookies control the poppy cultivation and some of it controlled by the Nagas, the synthetic drugs are controlled by the Maitis in the valley. And to be more precise, the Maiti Pangals, which are the Maiti Muslims. So you have a conflict happening for territorial control, but the territorial control of the land is to further interest in narcotic business. And that's the truth. So what they did was activate a dormant ethnic conflict that was lying dormant for decades to ensure people kill each other. I met a Maiti family, okay, when I was in Manipur. That morning itself, the mother and father were shot by the cookies. The following day, I met the cookie families and I went for the funeral as well. And that their son was attacked, brutally injured, and succumbed to the injuries.
So how do
In
we?
the conflict, there are good people and there are bad people. But there are people within the entire communities, both Maitis, Kukis, Nagas, that are creating a situation of a conflict because powerful leaders want control of the land. And
Yeah.
that's the truth in Manipur.
So this is starting to reflect what happens elsewhere in the world. Like, for example, when you talk about the mafia action or the drug action in the United States, or when you look at Myanmar and the military cooperation that used to exist with. So in many of these cases, it all boils down to economics, money, power. Those are the standard drivers of these kinds of conflicts. And it becomes, like you said, it becomes easy to kind of blame and continue to inflame those conflicts, so you can come across as a savior. Uh, to to change tracks a little bit. Now, when I grew up in India, I went to a Catholic missionary school. Right, I was in St. Joseph's Convent first, and then I went to St. Mary's High School until I went to Chennai and went to a different school. Now, growing up in Madurai in deep south, the place was a mix of all religions, right? We had, you know, the mercantile class was largely Muslims. They ran like the honesty stores, Dressland, the clothing empires. The grocery stores were largely, Hindu communities and so on and so forth. So there was this economic integration that was happening where there was no sense of who was minority and who was majority. Now, do you see that deteriorating? Has it gotten better? How do you see that economic integration, at least in where you see and live, based on your experience? What do you see?
So I come from Goa, and if you were to dress a man in Goa or a woman in Goa in the way a normal Goan dresses up, you won't be able to tell a difference between who's a Hindu, who's a Christian, who's a Muslim. And that's the reality of a place like Goa. We have lived together for decades, centuries, been through the Portuguese colonizing, and yet we continue to hold strong to our cultural roots. So at a Bain level, Suresh, at a Bain level, most Indians don't care about religion in terms of differences or divisions. Religion to them is something that is personal or something that is driven in a community. They do not fight with others on the basis of religion unless they are provoked to. And some leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, are responsible for the provocation. And that provocation is done because India has seen conflict based on religion that was brought in by our foreign invaders, in particular the British and the Portuguese in Goa. So there is a scar. The scar keeps healing, and each time it gets to heal, somebody comes and scratches it again. And that's exactly what's happening in the country.
And
That's
how much
exactly what's happening in Manipur.
so how much of this is local in the sense from within India, and how much of this scratching is coming from non-Indian outside forces? And when I say outside forces, it could take multiple forms. It could be in the form of money being poured in. It could be in the form of narratives that are created. It could be in the form of political pressure. From where you sit, from looking at it from a Indian perspective, where is the funding for this kind of scratching coming from?
Okay, so you have individuals like George Soros. Okay, George Soros, in my opinion, is an economic terrorist, and he set his eyes on India when he made the statement at Davos. People like George Soros work with political leaders, media, social influencers in India to put a narrative that would divide in order to bring a government that is more accommodating to their open borders philosophy.
Mm.
One. Second is China. China, through its international liaison department and various other organizations, in something as simple as even Chinese apps, loan apps, are dangerous to the sovereignty and the national security of India. Because International Liaison Department of the Communist Party of China in 2008 signed an MOU with the then General Secretary of the Indian National Congress, Rahul Gandhi. And if you study from 2008 right up to 2013, towards the end, what was the benefit that was accrued to China in the MSME industries and in the various other gains that they had, the economic gains, you will realize that we completely destroyed the MSMEs and the SMEs in India, giving an advantage to China at that point of time. So India's biggest asset is its human resource, its human capital. And the human capital makes it a huge market. And because it's a huge market, somebody wants to control. The people in India want to control it for power. The people outside of India want to control it for economic advantage. And that's really what the game is all about. The game of India is to control India's human capital because it's a huge market, and India's resources. India's resources are so strong, the mineral resources. That is why I don't get enamored when a Washington Post or a New York Times or even a foreign political leader praises India. Because we don't need their praise. India knows where it is. India knows where it wants to go to. There's the same people who are praising us right now are the same people who wait for the opportunity to bring us down. But what we need, really, is for the world to realize that India is progressing. India is moving forward. Do you know why? because India is a young India. If you look at the youth of India, when compare it with other nations, you would see there's a huge population and a huge vibrancy in that young India. And it is that young India that will redefine India's position globally. And we are climbing that steadily, and we're going to be at the top very, very soon, economically, socially, and with a huge vibrancy.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the concept of a growing, I would say, rapidly progressing, ambitious young India. Uh, in my company, for example, we have very large teams that work in India, and I recruit and hire people. And the one thing that I do notice, and I'd like to ask you if this is a trend that you see as well, is among those teams, there is really no consciousness of their cultural background, religious background, or anything like that. It's pretty much everybody kind of, pulling together for the same kind of goals, right? Whether it is, bonus at year end or promotion or a better job at a different company. So economics drives a lot of it. Like you pointed out, religion is personal. They do have their personal religious beliefs and act on it. But at least in the companies and the environment that I have been in, it seems like the young India that you talk about really doesn't care about what might have bothered or what might have bothered Indians maybe a couple of generations ago, maybe my father's generation or whatever. Do you see that as more broad based in India, where youngsters just don't really care about each other's religion? They just want to have a good time and just advance economically?
No. Well, okay. They don't care about religion or caste when it is divisive. They continue to think it's personal, or it's within the family or within the community. But a large section of them do not want to interfere when it is divisive. An Indian today, if you ask my daughters about India, they have a huge respect for Sanatan Dharma. We come from a Christian family, but their liking and their pull is towards Sanatan Dharma ethos and principles. I can't stop them from that, and I don't want to, because it's their cultural calling. A lot of Indians are that way, whether they're Hindus, Muslims, Christians. The cultural ethos pulls them. The love for India. See, in the end, a mother's cry, a mother's pain is known by a child. And if you see Mother India as your child, as your mother, then the child will always feel one towards India. And that's exactly what happens with many people. But certain sections of society tell you otherwise. They show you otherwise. Certain sections of the media as well. I've said it before earlier that it's not perfect. The mother is not perfect. The children are also not perfect. But stray incidents cannot become the identity of India, because by and large, Indians learn and have lived harmoniously together for a very, very long time, and will continue to do so, because they are interested in economic progress, they're interested in social progress, they're interested in their education progress, they're interested in having India compete with the best in the world. So they want better roads, they want better airports, they want better internet facilities, they want to have Apple to open its new products in India first. They want Indians to be leaders globally from India. That is why you're seeing a revolution in the startup space. That is why there are so many unicorns coming out of
Right.
India.
I mean,
That is why there are so many Indians working in foreign countries, establishing Indians' identity.
right. So I think what you're saying is, and I think if I summarize what you're saying, it's just that you know the whole notion of minorities under threat, the whole notion of India is facing down a genocide, all of these are narratives that don't resonate with the day-to-day lives of people in India, because they're going about their business, trying to grow their business, trying to found new companies perhaps, or they have what they are living and feeling is very different from what people abroad, what newspapers abroad, when we see articles in the Washington Post, New York Times all the time. We even have a gentleman who's made it a living predicting how close India is to actual genocide. So we kind of know the fact that I mean, we have George Staunton, who keeps every opportunity he gets up there and says, well, we have 10 steps to genocide, India is on step 9, right? That's what he says all the time. Now, I visit India.
I would love, Suresh, I would love for you to ask the gentleman to have a conversation with me. I'll bring all the facts and figures that he requires.
Yeah.
And let's have an intelligent conversation. See,
Yeah.
okay. Firstly, I'm not a minority in India. Please, okay. I am not a minority. I am a proud son of Bharat Mata. The fact that I'm a Christian is secondary to my Indianness. So I'm never going to call myself a minority. I don't want to be in a minority post, even in the government or in the party or in any form, because I'm not a minority, right? I cannot be a minority to my own mother. No mother treats a child as a majority or a minority. And this is my mother, right? So I'm not going to voice what the other Christians think about it or the other minorities, because if they want to consider themselves to be a minority, it's an insult to them. A mother is a mother irrespective. A mother does not distinguish between her children. I'm a parent, I have 2 daughters. Are you asking me to choose between them? That my elder is majority and my younger is minority? I can't do that. No parent can do that.
Yeah, Savio, one of the words, I like to listen to Sanskrit words and understand their meaning. And I learned that the word sahodara, sahodari, means the one who has shared the same womb. So when you say Bharat Mata, India as a mother, everybody is a brother, right? Or a sister. So there is no difference. So in that context, I wanted to understand, like my Indian Christian friends feeling so very strongly that, somewhere in India, not in their community, okay, but somewhere in India, the Christians are being abused. Or sometimes the Muslim community saying, oh, somewhere in India, this is happening. As the director of the Global Foundation for Civilizational Harmony, how do you make sure, or how do you educate, let's say, the Christian community, the Muslim community, about that sense of nationalism and staying away from these divisive actions by people who have a profit motive? So how do you do that?
So as the role as a director of the Global Foundation for Civilizational Harmony is relatively new, and we are reviving the organization to work not only in India but at a global level. Now, the most important thing about religion is to be able to find a common thread that binds all of us together, and then to come under that common thread that forms a plan or a document or a understanding between people of different religions on how to avoid conflict and how to work towards conflict resolution. Now, one of the most brilliant documents I've ever seen in resolving a conflict was the Abraham Accords that was signed by the Middle Eastern countries and Israel. The person who drafted that account is somebody that I know, and I've seen that document, I've studied that document, and if you read it, there's one particular clause in the Abraham Accords that very, very beautifully summarizes the connect that goes beyond religion and talks about every one of them being an Arab and being of that land, that particular land, not only so much of an Arab, but belonging to that particular land in the Middle East. And that's the common thread. So today your religion could be something else. You could be a Christian, you could be a Hindu, you could be a Muslim, you could be a Sikh. But you're connected by that land. Your roots are connected in that land. And by that, you are together. The roots, right? And that's really what is important for us as a country as well. For us to rise up above religion, to rise up above caste, to rise up above political differences. Today it's all about whether you're with Modi or you're without Modi. Modi is doing a wonderful job, and Modi will continue to do a wonderful job. He will do his duty and he will move, and somebody else will come. But India will prevail. India will continue. Young leaders will take India forward. So as an Indian, you have to rise above petty politics as well. Because at the end of the day, I had a few people telling me, what is a Goan doing in Manipur, trying to solve work for peace in Manipur? You should be concerned about Goa. Are they not my brothers and sisters as well? Is it not my duty to go and find out what went wrong with the people that I genuinely think are good people at heart? What drove them to insanity? What drove them to this madness? I'll show you. I've seen videos. I will not make them public. I've seen videos. I've seen photos that are devastating to the human mind. I've heard stories that are devastating to a human psyche itself. What drives a person to madness? If not people instigating people through social media, through political, influence. When does a human being lose his humanity and become insane? In one of the cases, one of the mobs was slapping a 3-year-old boy.
Yeah,
just because he belonged to another community.
Yeah.
So
whole...
actually, Savio, sorry. So actually, Savio, that's a good question about Goa. How do you make sure this doesn't happen in Goa or in Kerala? We have 20% Christians in Kerala. So how do we make sure what's a fire that's happened in one part doesn't spread to other parts?
So I've been talking to the government in Goa. I've been talking to social leaders and religious leaders as well. I personally believe that after Manipur, Goa will be the target of people wanting to create a communal conflagration in India because of the percentage of Christian population in Goa. Manipur also has a decent concentration of Christian population, though spread between the various denominations. Goa has predominantly a large section of the Roman Catholic, as compared to Manipur, where there are other denominations that are higher. The intent will start with small issues, and then they will try and create a boiling point or a tipping point for the conflagration to flame, to spark, and then turn into a fire. Which is why I've written an article and I've spoken to even the concerned influencers in the state that we need to be alert. We need to rise up above religions, because Goa is a culture where Hindus go to churches, Christians go to temples. We're a part of all the festivals over there. We take part in the carnivals. We take part in the church services like Christmas and various other feasts that are there. We're a part of Shigmo and the Hindu festivals that are there. There cannot be a religious divide in Goa. We cannot allow it to be permeated in Goa. We won't allow it to happen. It will. There is the target, but I'm pretty confident in my people that the people of Goa will rise above caste and creed to stem and to stump every communal conflagration that is tried in Goa.
I know we are coming up on almost 2:00, and it's past midnight. And so we're keeping you up way late. And as a journalist, you're perhaps used to it, but I still feel guilty about it.
No, that's all right.
We have there are a couple of questions that that people have asked. One question that somebody has been asking, and I'm sure this is more common, is I think you addressed it partially, which is, why do people target India? I think your answer was probably because India is growing. It's a large market. There's a lot of money to be made from India, and I think people are kind of fighting over the spoils in a sense,
Yes.
trying to create a carcass so they can fight over so they can peacefully eat the spoils rather than let the animal grow and be on its own, right? If you want to take a living being, if you treat the country like a living being, then you want the living being to grow, prosper, and be better. But if you think of it as a carcass to be consumed, then you want to just kill it, right? So presumably,
that's not what they think of India as. They think of India as a beautiful bride that they want to violate.
I see.
And keep violating.
It's more like possessing.
If you look at even the past history, they came in very sneakily, whether it was the Portuguese, whether it was the British, of course, the Islamic invaders came in very aggressively. They came to India because India had the resources, India had the wealth, India had the knowledge, and they wanted to corrupt it, they wanted to violate it, they wanted to make it impure, and that's what they succeeded in a large part of it. A lot of people talk about India from a geographical point of view, and that may be correct as far as we are today. But Bharat goes beyond the geographical boundaries of India. Bharat goes way, way beyond that. Because if you look at it, other parts of Asia, you look at parts of the CIS countries, you look at parts of Afghanistan and other places, you will realize that Sanatan Dharma, the principles of Sanatan Dharma were also enshrined in those nations, though today most of them are converted to the Abrahamic religions.
Yeah, I mean, I have never really felt a big, I've never really felt a huge pressure in terms of, the conflict between Abrahamic and Hindu religions. Probably maybe because I grew up in a traditional household, so we had our gurus backing and telling telling us how to be good Hindus. Coincidentally, there's a very interesting incident. My guru from the thing of from the Sringeri Samathanam, he was once asked by a foreigner who wanted to convert to Hinduism to say, I want to become a Hindu. And after a conversation, he turned around and said, no, I just want you to be a better Christian. I mean, you're a Christian, be a better Christian. You're a Hindu, be a better Hindu. You're a Muslim, be a better Muslim. I think that's kind of gone out of fashion. I think that notion of be a better who you are has kind of gone out of fashion. And we might have to do some work to bring it back into fashion, to say, look, we, we can all live together better if we develop mutual respect, rather than try and deal with it as mutual tolerance, which is kind of condescending, or just that, but I think mutual respect is something we should all really work towards and fight for.
So to me, okay, what my understanding is that Sanatan Dharma is about finding the God within you and finding the God around you. Okay. And it's also very, very interesting because the thing in the Bible that has most touched my life has been the commandment that Jesus gave his disciples. And that actually was my start into finding out more. And that's how I came to Sanatan Dharma. So my start happened in the Christian theology. And then I came to understand more when I moved into Sanatan Dharma. What was the commandment? The commandment was love God with all your heart and with all your soul. And the second was love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. Now, love God would mean what? Do we know God? Do we see God? Can we define God? Can we put God in a box? Can we put God in an image? Can we put God in a statue? What is God? God, or the manifestation of God, is the creation of God itself. That is where the God energy, the God particle exists in every creation, and that is nature, that is humanity, that is humans that he's created, animals that he's created, life forms, plant life, nature itself. That is the manifestation of God. And as a child, your first manifestation of God is your parents. Your own family becomes your manifestation of God, which is why in Sanatan Dharma, the value towards parents is placed so high. It is in fact, it's almost equal. It is equal to God and more.
Yes, yeah, it is,
because they are pro-creators in the plan that God has for creation. That's why parents become equal to God, right?
In fact, in one formulation, yeah,
the second part was love your neighbor as yourself. So the first principle in that is to love yourself before you love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. How can you love yourself? How can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? So what does it mean to love yourself? That you're black, you're white, you're fat, you're thin, you come from a low economic strata of society, you come from a high economic strata of society, you're in the middle, you're blind, you're deaf. Love yourself because you are unique. Whichever way the world tells you, you might not be unique. There is something that is special in you. That's why God created you in that manner. You just have to find that. So what do people want? Why do people turn towards God? What are they looking at? They are looking for hope in a world that is spread and filled with fear. That is why people turn to God. That is why they turn to God men, some of whom who turn to be fake. But they're looking for hope.
Yeah, fair enough.
They're looking for hope. Every individual wants to believe that there is a power higher than them that is going to turn their life, which they consider to be a little distressed, a little depressed, to one of hope and to one of joy. But what many don't realize, that the power to transform yourself was given by God within you itself. If you're only able to calm down, stay quiet, and meditate and turn into yourself to find the purpose of your life. And the purpose of your life is not a goal. The purpose of your life is living, and living it to the fullest, and living it on the principles of Dharma.
So excellent words.
Savio,
Thank you.
this is, yeah.
Thank you for those
I want
words.
to thank you, Savio, for joining. We should do more of this. Before we conclude, I want to say happy Raksha Bandhan. This is my
Thank you.
Rakhi to Savio, and I have one for Suresh,
Oh, gee,
and
thanks.
I
I'll
have
give
one
it.
for our back-end support, Rishabh Saraswat from our CoHNA Canada. I mean, it's truly, I think, very appropriate that tomorrow is Raksha Bandhan, and here you are talking about being the children of the same Bharat Mata. I mean, even though we are away from India, we are loyal to our new home country wherever we are. We love our roots, we love our mother country, and I think that is the sense, and that is the feeling that we should continue to have, to bring closure to any divisions. There is no need for divisions. So with that, Savio, we will continue to keep in touch. We would love to have your wise words again. I think we all need to hear it. So
Thank you so much. And
Great
thanks for
work,
everybody who joined us today. I know it's a work day and it's during work hours, so we really appreciate it. But particular thanks to Savio for staying up this late to join us here in the United States. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks to the audience, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.